All right, we'll get going here because I know people will keep filing in as we go. I want to welcome everybody to our second Playbook coaching series session here tonight, March 7th, I believe we are. Really excited about building off our first week, which was a lot even more in depth and more engaging than I think all of us expected. Tonight we have a session that's absolutely necessary for lacrosse to become or to grow and develop and even maintain itself in our country. And that's a session really focused on coaching ethics, as well as coaches and referees and their relationship becoming positive and growing and developing. We have a real all-star Hall of Fame panel here tonight. First I want to thank everybody for coming on our panel. We've got Ian Wilson, who's a referee in Saskatchewan, but has reffed at every level. I've had the pleasure of having Ian ref a number of my games in a real positive manner. He's reffed internationally at world championships and comes with a ton of experience. We have Brien, who's the head of the officials technical group in British Columbia. Again, a breadth of referee experience and gave up his time tonight. We have Coach Paul Day, who is currently a coach with the Philadelphia Wings in the NLL and is coaching Tyke, so that's quite the balance between high and low. We have Coach Daren, a longtime coach out of British Columbia, who's coached at every level in both box and field. Also is a principal like Mr. Wilson and brings a ton of experience. Daren is well known everywhere in lacrosse and one of the first lacrosse people I crossed paths with, over 20 years ago. And then I saved Coach Glenn Clark for last, head coach of the new Albany NLL team. I'm not going to let any names slip. And again, Glenn brings a ton of experience to the group tonight. We're really excited to have kind of an open forum discussion with the coaches and referees. We want to let them engage. Some of the comments for panelists that are on or attendees, please post your questions in the Q&A. We're going to get to those not only just at the end, but throughout the session. So if you have a question, please go post it in the Q&A. Make sure you're utilizing the opportunity we have in front of you. Our first session tonight, we're going to run for about 45 minutes to an hour and then take a little bit of a break. So if people have any food on a smoker or anything, they can go have a quick bite and then we'll get back to the second session. First session is really going to be focusing on some coaching development and in particular, competitive and recreational coaching. We have a lot of coaches that coach both and struggle to go between both. We have a lot of coaches that maybe coach recreational, but they treat it like competitive and vice versa. Maybe they're a little bit too lackadaisical with competitive coaching. So we're going to focus our first session on some of the ethics and some of the approach of some of the coaches and referees on those sessions. I'm going to start off, we're going to focus on a Tyke and novice. I'm going to start with Coach Day, who's coaching Tyke currently. He just let on. Coach Day, and again, other panelists, feel free to put your hand in here. But Coach Day, maybe you could start us off here tonight by just giving us an idea on what you have for goals right now with your Tyke group. Maybe give us a little bit of background on the Tyke group you have, and then talk about what are some of the goals you would have for your group.
Yeah, well, hey, first off, thanks for having me on here. This is a great opportunity to talk about our great sport. So I live in I'm a Peterborough guy, but I live in Grimsby, which is not a hotbed for lacrosse. We're 20 minutes from St. Catharines. So the last time I coached minor was Tyke, and then obviously last year was, there was no lacrosse. So we had some field lacrosse here in Ontario, which was great for the young guys. It was the first time they ever got to play field, but this year I'll be novice and probably a development year. But I think it's really important that I think as I've matured, I always played, when I played, the more fun I had, the better we played and the better the game was. So I think even as a coach now, into my 50s, I'm 52, and I think that's important. And with my novice guys, I've got a 10-year-old boy, he's second-year novice now. And for them, Tyke and novice, that's the NLL for them. That's their NLL right now. And I think, it has to be fun every day they come to the rink, because some of the kids, you know, they're really new to the game. They might be hockey players or play other sports, and we got to make sure that lacrosse is a lot of fun for them. But as coaches and parents, you have to have a plan. My plan is no different in Tyke or novice than in the pro. If we're going to go to practice, we got a practice plan, and it's obviously about development. But everything you do in practice, and whether you're in the rink or you're actually having a, you know, a skills night on a field or a turf somewhere with just helmet and gloves, it's all got to be focused on having fun. And they don't even know they're improving because they're having so much fun doing a drill. And I think that coaching at the, you know, the little guy age for me has actually helped me, you know, coach at pro, because I understand how much fun it is to be around these kids that are just so excited to get to the rink. And I think, but the big thing is, you know, this is called a playbook, and you have to have a plan and a playbook for your whole season. So this year, I know my little guy, he plays hockey with a lot of these guys. My little guy might be in the driveway shooting lacrosse ball 3 or 4 times a week, even in the wintertime. I know most of my kids haven't probably picked up a stick in a year and a half because there's no lacrosse last summer. They were probably at the lake, probably fishing, which is great. They were doing other things. So, you know, we're almost going to go back to basics for the first couple of weeks, and, you know, loose balls again, passing and catching. They haven't done it. And we had a session last week, and my little guy's like, whoa, our guys are rusty. Well, this is great. It's March, and we're starting already to kind of get those skills together. But having so much fun out there every time you come to the rink, and then B, as coaches, having a plan, which will change every week. But I think that's, you know, for me, the number one thing is making sure every kid that comes to the rink feels important, feels a part of it, and is going to have a lot of fun.
Just building on what Paul had said, I think we have to keep in mind a lot of these kids, their ability to concentrate is probably in that window of like 6 to 7 minutes. So like Paul has said, a stations approach where you can't be out there on your own, but you can pull in possibly parents that have not played the game before, just to show them the station, if that's the loose ball station. But they got to rotate pretty quickly. Part of the target shooting back in the day when my son came through the system, you want to find, it was, you know, going way back, but Miley Cyrus, Corey in the House, like any sort of target on the wall you can put inside a sheet of paper. And shoot at it beyond the excitement of shooting at a, you know, a taped X or a square.
Now maybe we'll head over to Coach Clark. I think anything to add on that, Coach Clark?
I do, and you know, both what Paul and Daren said. I mean, I remember I had 2 older boys that went all the way through peanut, all the way to midget, and a couple things. One is, I didn't have a lot of, you know, the difference between the minor and the upper levels. You know, Daren and Paul touched on it, the enjoyment factor, but also the plan. I mean, every practice I would make a point of having a written out practice plan, a typed out practice plan, so the kids would see it, the parents would see it. They know it's purposeful. They know they're there, you know, to develop their skills. And a couple of things that, you know, all these years later, what my older guys remember is, you know, they don't remember, you know, finishing whatever they finished in the provincials or winning. You know, they remember going to Sarnia and running around the hotel playing manhunt. And they remember, you know, those are the things they talk about. And I remember a friend of a lot of us here on the call, Derek Keenan. I remember him telling me a story about his older boy, Ryan, who, you know, is a very good lacrosse player. And he was talking about them being in the provincials, and they were playing in Whitby. And, you know, they might have been 11 or 12 years old, and big game, you know, semifinals of the provincials, and pretty serious. The parents are into it. And he says he still remembers Ryan being on the bench middle of the game, turning around and looking at Derek and saying, "Hey, we're going to the Brooklyn Fair after this." So it kind of puts, you know, the focus of the adult isn't always the focus of the child or the youth. So, you know, we all hit on this and we all know this, but it is an important perspective to keep, that the lasting thing, you want to be accountable, you want to teach the skills, you want to develop the athlete and give them the tools to get as far as they can go. And it's going to be different for every kid. But what's going to last with them is those memories, those enjoyable takeaways. And we can never lose sight of why they're really there. And I mean, Paul and Daren both touched on it as well. But, I just remember talking to my kids now about it. And those are the things they remember. I mean, running around a hotel in Sarnia and doing things like that. That's the lasting impact that we have. And if we do it right, those are the memories they take with them.
Hey, Russ, and Fridgie brought up the 5 to 7 minutes. It's so funny Fridgie says that. So Fridgie and I worked before together, and we probably would like 20 to 30 minutes of video with these guys. Well, I know with us now, our rule is like 5 to 7 minutes of video with our players. That's it. Because their attention, they don't get better with the attention span. That's literally pro guys with video, 5 to 7 minutes, and we're done. We're moving on. So, that's such a great point about the little guys. And you may be in a center where you don't have a lot of help, but you're going to be able to get a hockey dad out there, to move cones or move balls around. And, they're going to be so excited that they can help you too. And I mean, I think, it's so important that the moms and dads of those teams become involved, and they're all kind of part of that team. Because if they're having fun, their kids having fun, and they're going to get their friends. And let's be honest, for us in lacrosse, they're going to get their friends in the neighborhood to join because they're having so much fun, and we need more kids playing lacrosse.
I'm gonna move forward on this. I'm just gonna give Ian or Leah an opportunity to chime in on what they see, again, focusing on tyke and novice, that age group, what they see as referees as far as engagement between coaches. Like what's a good coach look like for you from the floor as a referee? Maybe Ian, you could start.
Sure. Thanks, Russ. Hey, everybody. Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, when we look at those are usually your young kids that are maybe in their first year, maybe second year. They're working hard to remember to blow the whistle when the ball goes, in the net or out of bounds or something. It reminds me of sort of a quote that I was reading somewhere in refereeing. And you guys are talking about practice time for the little guys and how important it is and how critical that skill development. And the one thing about refereeing that I think most people, particularly I think sometimes fans and even coaches sometimes forget, is that refereeing is called practice poor because we don't get to practice. Right? We don't, like you guys as players and coaches, get an opportunity to practice before you hit the floor or the field, all the things you want to do. And a young referee never gets that opportunity. They get to go to a clinic and they don't get to practice. They have to go out and throw a flag or put their arm in the air for a penalty the first time. And that's incredibly intimidating for a young 14 or 15-year-old kid. So, I think it's a great opportunity for us to remember that as those coaches, that's a key takeaway, I think, is that they don't get an opportunity to practice anywhere. And that's their practice is your first game that you've practiced for maybe for a couple of weeks or whatever, is their very first opportunity to blow a whistle. So it's just an interesting perspective that came to me once through an article I was reading, and I thought it kind of applies here. I think particularly in that sort of 12U and tyke novice area, where sometimes we're expecting those young kids to be far more developed than they are capable of being at that first or second or third year reffing. Thoughts, Lee?
Lee, yeah, Lee, anything to add on that?
Yeah, thanks, Russ. Exactly. It's all about on-the-job training. Young referees and some of the referees in the middle of the pack, how they learn is through gameplay. They're out there working on the balls and strikes. And Russ, I think you asked what we would see as in a good coach at the novice and tyke level. It's a coach that supports those young referees. and supports the mentor or the shadow or whomever's out there with those young referees. As somebody who's been out watching, supervising referees at that level, I find it's really difficult to watch a coach who tries to influence those rookie referees for competitive reasons. And the best way a young official can get support is let them, you know, they're gonna have struggles, but let them do their job and support them and worry about the team, their team and the gameplay.
Yeah, I've always kind of felt too that one of the roles of a very experienced coach, especially at those levels, is not only your team, is also helping those officials, right, understand some of the nuances of the game. Coach Clark, you had your hand.
Yeah, and Ian's point about I forget the term you used, but practice poor or whatever it is with the officials. I mean, it's a great term, and it's something we don't think about really. And you know, until you put it in that context, I didn't think of it all that much either. But it makes perfect sense. And I think one of the things that we need to do, you know, sort of globally in the game and at the minor level, is view it more of a partnership of development between players, coaches, referees. It almost at times becomes an us and them. They've got their developmental path, and we have a developmental path as coaches, players, referees have their development path. But if you're looking at overall growth and improvement of the game, you know, the framing of it can be development together and parallel development. And I think that's something that's got to get into the heads of coaches and even officials, that this is a growth opportunity and we're moving along this parallel path because we want excellence in all three departments. We want excellence in reffing, coaching, and playing. So, you know, a sort of a focus, a mental focus shift on a partnership between the groups I think it would help coaches and refs as well, just sort of having a little bit of a step back, saying like, we're in this together. This is part of what we need to do to develop excellence in our game.
Yeah, go ahead, Coach Dave.
A little slow on the unmute button, sorry. I know we'll talk a little bit about this later, but I mean, it's funny, in Taika Novice, the best coaches during a game are actually the referees on the floor when they're, you know, at least the guys I've seen in Ontario are always like coaching the kids through the game, like get off the back, it's a loose ball. They're talking the whole game. And I mean, I just think whenever I see that, it's, and there's a lot of guys and girls that have been reffing, you know, the Taika Novice PB for a long time, and they're so good at it. It's unbelievable. And we as coaches appreciate that. You know, we always talk to them before the game, and, you know, you kind of ask, and hey, like, can you help the kids out here with, you know, and they communicate all game. It's unreal how much the kids learn from the refs too. I think that's such a huge piece to mine across. I remember that when I was a little kid too, growing up. So I think that's, you know, the referees are coaching our kids as much as the coaches are.
Okay, I want to ask a question here, and I'm going to go to Coach Fridge here. Do you think at the Tyke and novice level, keeping it whatever that is now, I don't know if we call it that still, if we're calling it U10, do you think there is a difference between recreational coaching and competitive coaching? I guess what I'm asking is there a competitive stream at Tyke and novice, or should we simply be focusing on recreational skill development with no concern about high performance yet? I think you're on mute, Coach Fridge.
Sorry about that. There are times or associations that are currently doing evaluations to determine who A1 players may be. It's my hope that people see the long-term goal, and that's the development of the player. So in smaller associations where they can only have 2 or 3 teams, to compete against. Things are a little bit more different. But in the case where Ridge Meadows, where we came through, we probably had 8 to 10 teams a year that we were able to create our own mini house league. It did make for times where what would be a 3 or a 4, those that are brand new to the game, they would all, there's a way for the coaches to work that out where some of the newer players or the weaker skilled players are out there playing against their own. There's ways to avoid this competitive approach. Certainly when you get to Pee Wee, that's where things make a difference. I think until that time, I feel like we should all be focused on making the right choice as far as it being recreational and fun for everyone.
Coach Clark, you have anything to add on that?
My thing, all along is, and I had it with my 2 sons. One was a much stronger player than the other. My whole take on that is you need to play in your competitive bracket. So you need to be developing with players of your caliber, your development. So I think that, in terms of the question is about competitive streams, I think you do if you've got a real sort of separation in ability, because I think if you have, players that are new or not as developed as other players playing with those players, both developments get stunted. So I think we do have to have separate streams of development. Now, I don't know if that necessarily means competitive versus recreational, because they can be under the same umbrella, but I do think that at whatever age, you need to be playing with comparable competition. So I don't know if you need to go to an elite level or an elite programming, but I certainly think you need to have groupings where they're competing with like ability athletes. Now you're muted.
Following Coach Bridge. I'm going to push this to Coach Day now. The next part of that is a lot of the areas that I see that concern me are, especially at any level, and I think the most successful coaches I've ever worked with focus on process, not results. What are some comments that you could have for coaches that are on here that allow them to continue to focus on process versus results? We talked about, you go to a Sarnia tournament, when the kids come back, they're talking about their man tracker. They're not talking about whether they lost in the final. So, to me, the results often get inflated by the adults, not the kids. So what are some comments you might have on, results versus process-oriented coaching?
And I think that, that goes to, we talked about having a plan and, that plan for practices and games. Obviously, some of the kids are at different levels of that process. And, having the goals that, some kids in Tyke and Novice, we're talking about those ages now, catching a pass in a game. That's huge, right? And when those kids come off, you've got to be able to, congratulate them on the success in the middle of a game. Like, that's an exciting time. And kind of going back to what Clarkie and Friggy said there, I guess making sure that whatever development you're in, your team's not losing by 11, winning by 10, because that can defeat the kids. But there's a hierarchy of skills, we grew up in Peterborough. It was like, okay, in Tyke, this, Novice, this, Pee Wee, this, Bantam, this, Midget. And I think if you kind of look at it that way, that's the process is, okay, obviously scooping balls, picking them up, passing and catching. Those are the things you're looking for in Tyke and Novice. And, you're right. The parents, most of the time, maybe more than the coaches, are more concerned about winning and losing. But I know for most Tyke and Novice coaches that I've, had time to be around, it's just about having fun. And yeah, you get to provincials and you want to win and all that, but you're just happy that, you know, young Johnny actually, hey, he might have scored his first goal at the provincials after 3 or 4 months of zone play and everything. And that's just, the whole team goes crazy. Right? But the hierarchy of skill, or whatever you want to call that, you know, in type, they have to, by the end of the year, they should be able to do this. By novice, the end of the year, they do that. By Pee-wee, and I think that's kind of globally as box lacrosse people, you know, whether it's a CLA model or whatever model it is, that's so huge in the process. That's kind of how I look at it with our little guys. And like I said before, because we missed last summer, our novice team will go back to that hierarchy in tyke and say, okay, we have to almost start fresh here for the first month and get good at these skills and then move on to the next skills. And obviously in other centers, there's A and B teams or whatever. I mean, where I am, there's not, but you know, and the A team's going to have more hierarchy than the B team in those skills. But I think you have to have a plan and you have to have a process for sure. And at the end of the day, we just want kids to have fun and more kids join, you know, from your hockey team to get them involved in lacrosse because it's such a great game. And I think, you know, for me as a pro guy, never being involved in minor lacrosse, I'm a retired cop, and a guy I worked with played lacrosse. Then he played pro hockey forever, kind of out of lacrosse, and he brought his, you know, his 2 boys to watch one of our paperweight games, and kids were getting lit up. And he's like, my kids aren't playing this game. And I think when you're in paperweight, tyke, and novice, if there's anything you can do to kind of, as coaches, especially talking to other coaches and in practice, you know, communicating that the game's about speed and skill. It's not about the hitting and the violence. And I think that's, you know, as mentors in the game, we have to be so much better at that so that, you know, parents will come and say, this is a great game. My kid's running, you know, they're not getting, it's not a yard sale with hitting. And I think that's a big thing about the process as well. We've all got to be much better at, I mean, I talk to a lot of lacrosse people, old school people and hockey people about it's important to have contact in the game. I'm like, no, it's not really important. I mean, I watched the best hockey player in the world, probably in Edmonton, Connor McDavid, who never played contact hockey till he's Pee-wee or Bantam. It didn't hurt his development, made him a pretty good hockey player. So our game should be no different. And I think that's one of the biggest things we need to sell over the next few years is taking the violence out of I don't want to say violence, it's not right, but you know, the 100-pound kid shouldn't be hitting the 40-pound kid in novice.
It's a great point. I'm going to go to Ian and Lee on this, and we're going to kind of sidetrack because that's a really contentious question right now that's happening across our country is, should we be allowing contact in novice and under? And if we are, what does that look like? Ian, do you have?
Well, I think that I'm certainly siding with Paul on that one. I think that any kind of contact that we have at those really young age divisions should kind of be the natural sort of body bumping that happens when you're trying to pick up a loose ball. You know, I just don't think there's I don't think there's any advantage long term or short term, and I think I see big disadvantages in having body checking or body contact in that those really young ages, whether it's box or field. And I think some of that is the CLA to dictate, some of it is individual provinces, and then within that individual associations and leagues and how they choose to have those things refereed. And then that's where we have a role to play. I think when we were talking a little bit before the webinar started, this session started, about what elevates coaches, players, fans, it's that big hit that maybe goes unpenalized, and so I think that's a role that we have to play to make sure with our young officials, but all officials, that those are the ones that you got to make sure you catch. If you miss a technical kind of a thing, you know, an offside or this or that or some in the crease call, and you miss that, that's a whole lot different than missing somebody getting lit up and hurt or whatever. Then everybody's, you know, goes way up here, right? Everybody's pounding on the glass or jumping over the, you know, whatever, right? Everybody gets upset. So that's, I think, a place that the referees can, but I think some of that is dictated by what the philosophy of the association or the province is around that body contacting.
Lee, anything to add on that based on your experience on how, you know, maybe more of a defined focus on, you know, place and push or whatever you call it at tyke and or novice and under, how that would affect from a referee standpoint the game?
Right. I mean, player safety is always paramount for referees to keep in mind. We preach it religiously at our clinics. In the refereeing world, for a young level 1 official, novice is the most difficult level for them to referee. It might be, for a little older level 1 official, might be more difficult for them to referee, because it's the first year of full-on contact for these players. I mean, I don't know if it should be taught or be allowed at the younger group, so age level, so they can get some experience before they get into novice. But it just seems like as soon as athletes get into novice, the young players, it's a difficult jump, and it's a tough jump for officials.
Perfect. Okay, we've got one question here I'm going to throw at Coach Clark. Bert Fong asks, what would you consider an acceptable age to be playing up? Because playing up would mean it would be more competitive, but it might not be as fun as staying in the same division where they're having fun with their friends. So I think the question is, you've got, you know, a kid, John Doe, who's in tyke, but he's maybe quite a bit bigger than the other kids. Do you move him up so he can be more competitive, or do you leave him down where all his buddies are and he gets to talk to, you know, at school each and every day?
I think with something like that, it would be case by case. I don't know if you could have a sort of a blanket policy. I think, as you mentioned, if he's a very large, if he's larger than his peers and can handle it physically, but I think it goes back a little bit to Paul's point as well about the contact at the lower levels. I think you got to be concerned about safety. I know some centers, and my youngest guy is 7. And when they had lacrosse 2 summers ago, we didn't have a lot of players. So they moved him up, and he went from whatever he was, 5 or 6, to playing with 8 and 9-year-olds. And it's nerve-wracking as a parent, because I mean, that's a huge age difference. It was a house league, so they were being instructed not, to tone down the contact and that. So I think it's case by case, but I did want to add to Paul's point there. I think with the younger guys, the novice, the tyke, that the contact, I agree with Paul. I think we need to go to some equal pressure type of model where you're not having kids blown up. And years ago, probably 10 years ago, myself, Derek Keenan, and Jimmy Veltman, we put a proposal together for the OLA to get rid of off-ball cross-checking in those younger age groups. And I think Paulie might even have signed it with us as well, because we were having 10-year-olds do things that you didn't allow pros to do. And that was wiping guys out away from the ball. And from our perspective, in terms of development and being a parent watching this, it didn't make sense to us. And we were also losing a lot of families. We were losing a lot of hockey families. We had hockey families saying, our son, daughter's not playing this. It's too rough. It's too physical. So I think we should be moving towards, whether it's an equal pressure or whatever the terminology you want to use. But I don't think we need 8, 9, 10-year-olds blowing each other up, especially away from the ball. I mean, lacrosse is physical enough. If you had contact cross-checking on the ball, that's enough. But, I remember instance where, 10-year-olds getting pinned to the boards away from the ball with off-ball cross-checking. And I think those are things that we can improve in our game and move away from. And it'll become a more sort of inclusive and we'll retain more athletes that way.
It's a very interesting point. I want to kind of expand on it and go above tyke and novice, even as far as age groups. But the point being that a lot of times a very experienced good coach would understand that if you are pinning that kid against the boards off ball, the defender is now unable to give help, of course, right? So if a good coach teaches his offensive players to get around him, you're going to have lots of, really good looks. The 24-foot line, of course, was put in place to try to eliminate hitting all over the floor off ball, and to try to bring it more dialed in front of the net. The question I would have is, and this can be Pee-wee, Bantam, wherever, is the 24-foot line in Canadian box lacrosse required, or is it something now that is giving coaches that maybe aren't teaching the right way an easy crutch to be in a position to be competitive? Maybe I'll go to Coach Fridge on this to start, or maybe he's gone here. Coach Day, I'll start with you and then we'll go back to Coach Fridge.
Fridge, you're there. You want to handle that question? Did you hear it?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You start.
Yeah, with Clarkie there, I mean, I really think our game could be so much better if it is all about skill and speed and Clarkie and I and Fridgie, all of us, we're old school guys here. So we're like, we grew up with this stuff, and I mean, and it's our business, and I think we're losing so many people because of, I don't want to say, the physicality of the game, and moms and dads, they come and see that, and they just, we've all lived with concussions where you don't remember days, and here we are letting 6, 7, and 8-year-olds crush each other, and we don't need to do that anymore. And I think the game last summer, COVID lacrosse, listen, back here, my little guy was involved in ULL, United Lacrosse League, field lacrosse, and it was kind of no contact, but there was still bumping. There was still the little cross checks, and it was outstanding lacrosse. There was contact. It was like watching any of us who've watched women's hockey. Like, some of the best hockey I've ever watched in my life is women's hockey. Yeah, there's no contact, but there's contact. But it's not blatant lay people out. And I think, the skill that this game that we have it's so important that the CLA or whoever mandates that, hey, listen, hitting, up until Pee-wee or Bantam, and I would go that far to say Pee-wee included with novice and tyke is all about skill development. Cross check on the ball, that's the, the old, you're using your stick basically as an oar, directing them. That's, proper technique in the cross check, and it's bumping in here, and that's about it. No open field hits. No guys who are, in Pee-wee that are 5'8", 190 pounds running a kid over with the ball. That's the same thing offensively. That's a penalty. So those are the things we have to put into our game. And, I'm sure there's people at home thinking that it's wrong. That's not the way. But guess what? It's 2021, and that's the way. From the time me, Clarkie, and Fridgie played in the MILL or the NLL, our game is fast and clean now compared to what it used to be, and it's way better. And I think that, I guess going back to your question, that line, how many years ago was that put in the 80s?
Yeah, no, I think it was probably put in, I want to say the early 2000s, late 90s, the 24-foot line was put in. I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, I think just we have to mandate that we clean the game up, and again, makes it easier for our referees, our coaches, parents, the kids. It makes it a better game, and we'll definitely have more people involved. The funny thing is, we're talking about box here and the development. For us, there's some experience with U.S. box in the U.S. It's a very different game. They're trying to teach box lacrosse, but they've actually, around the boards. I talked to Kevin Crowley, has Fusion in Philadelphia, and around the boards and the glass, it's almost like it's a 3-yard line where you're not getting hit against the boards or the glass. The young novice type Pee-wee kids, Bantam, and that's a great thing, right? Like, I think that's, that goes to kids enjoying the game, whether Clarkie's 7-year-old, if he goes up and plays with the 8 and 9-year-olds, he doesn't have to worry about getting laid out. He just worries about, he's faster than kids. He's better with the stick. He's better with the ball. And I think that's huge. And I know, Fridge, you have a lot more experience in kind of the kids going all the way through and development than I do. You can probably speak to this a lot better than me.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is we can't put any further focus on, like, the officials have got to watch this or pay attention to it. It goes into our coaches association. It goes to the presidents of those associations on how they're making sure things are running the way they should. I don't disagree with that. Like, you've got to be, you know, a stick length or 2 stick lengths away from your man, whatever, however we decide that. But the old, you know, pack the house and clear the house and this sort of Neanderthal description of how to play defense. When I coached women's lacrosse, when my daughter came through the system for about 3 or 4 years, and you would play, you know, the biggest girl with the biggest pads would be in net, and then they would pack 5 people around. Well, we couldn't even do picks and rolls. So as a coaches association, as we've got to make sure, you know, we're focused to worry about equal playing time and not running OD, but zone defense is another reason why this isn't good. At least the elements of field lacrosse, we're sliding to help, we're providing help side. There's so many things we can do within how to teach proper defense than anchor the 2 biggest kids on the creases, you know, a C path to the ball, getting in the shooting lane. Like, there's some simple concepts that we can reinforce to make sure that we're developing our players. Because I know we're getting closer to the end of the session, but the goal for me is to make sure we have well-rounded players that play both offense and defense, so that they're not, you know, put into a little box that they can't play at the next level because they're just an offensive guy. It's those guys that can bounce between that are going to get those make pro teams as a transition player, get in and out of the lineup until they establish themselves. In the case of Dan Dawson, I mean, the fantastic guy that he is, he came in as a D-tranny guy and progressed his way up the floor.
Perfect. And I think that's a really good point by Coach Day. And I'm going to go to Lee here, but by Coach Day also, you know, from you guys 20 years ago when this 24-foot line or these things were put in to now, I mean, if you look at the pro level even, you know, the difference between your bottom end defensive guy and his stick skills 20 years ago to now are totally different. You know, you're not making a roster in the pro leagues anymore by just being a big bruising defenseman. You got to be able to handle the ball now. Lee, go ahead. You had your hand up there.
Yeah, I mean, this is all great conversation here. The situations around cross-checking that Coach Day and Coach Clark were just mentioning there, they're fouls, they're penalties. I mean, there's rules in the Canadian lacrosse rule book that prohibit an off-ball player getting cross-checked right into the boards, or blown up in the middle of the floor. It's all should be place and push. The rule is there at all levels. It's just how it's officiated. It's just how it's emphasized through the governing bodies. So, I mean, is it on this group or other groups around us that can make it an emphasis and get those big bruising off-ball cross checks out of the game and emphasize the place and push right to from right down from Tyke right up to major.
And I'm going to go to Ian here just to finalize this point here before we move on. Ian, you primarily coach or referee field, so eliminating the 24-foot line in box lacrosse, it'd be quite interesting. You'd be going to essentially an off-ball field rule. How would that translate to training officials or having a little bit more leeway for officials?
Well, I think you know, as somebody that is almost purely a field guy, I've always sort of wondered about and struggled with the ability for somebody to hit somebody who doesn't have the ball. I can't think of another sport where that kind of happens. So that one always kind of has baffled me, and I've had some box people explain to me about, you know, the defensive, and I can see maybe somebody cutting through the middle, you lay a body on them or a stick on them, try and prevent that pass. That sort of makes sense. But the story I wanted to tell, and it kind of comes back to what Paul said, and it really struck me. I remember going to a lacrosse meeting in Ontario, probably about 10 years ago, and former mentor of ours for Lee and I, Jim Price, took us to a box game. I think it was junior C game, big game, a game 7, right? But it was junior C. And so I thought, well, game 7, it's going to be pretty, you know, a lot on the line. It's not going to be a lot of stupidity. And yeah, I was real wrong about that. And what I watched was, and it made me sad in a way, because what I watched was these flashes of brilliance, of skill, even at a level C, at a C level, these flashes of brilliance and skill. But mostly what guys were doing was either looking for the next opportunity to take somebody's head off, or trying to avoid getting their own head taken off. And that got in the way of all the beauty and the skill that was happening. So I Paul, when you mentioned that, it just really struck me. I thought there's got to be a way of toning down. Like, we want to keep the physicality in the game, both box and field. There's a physical side to the game, but I think if we can find a way of, through reffing and coaching and organizations, of lowering the emphasis on that and raising the emphasis on that skill level, because it is such a gorgeous game when it's played at that skill level. It's just beautiful to watch. Doesn't matter what version of it, women's, doesn't matter. Like, it just, when it's played at a high level of high skill, there isn't anything in the world that comes close.
Yeah, and it's a great point. The women's hockey point was a good point. If you watch women's field lacrosse, of course, the speed, the transition in that game can be quite remarkable too. We're going to kind of wrap up the session here. I encourage anybody that has questions to go and post them in the Q&A. We've been talking primarily at the youth. I mean, I think we're kind of hitting on bantam and all these other age groups. I'm going to ask you a question now, and I'll start with Coach Fridge, because he jumped out last time. Yeah. Midget and junior, different. You know, a lot of people approach midget or bantam, midget and junior at it, you know, differently. Tell me what you think an ethical coach looks like at that age group.
Well, you're still skill building in all areas. You do your best to focus on fun. The practices have to have elements of fun, but you are in a competitive mindset, typically in midget and definitely in junior. You want to continue to grow the game at midget in particular, where, you know, the gap in the score is increasing. You know, Paul said 11, but like beyond 7 or 8, is there a way to adjust your game plan to not blow teams out? Year after year, an association, I'll say it here, Langley, whether they have the skill guys in their lineup or not, they sign up for A1. And I think they should get kudos for pushing themselves to get to that level, because in other parts of our province, you know, if one team can't beat, you know, the number 1 seed, they make a choice to play A2, as opposed to, you know, playing at the highest level they can in order to develop their players. But if the focus is on winning or getting to the provincials, that skews things. We definitely want to focus on proper habits and have expectations, but we have to have find a system that matches what our kids can do, versus a coach watching a pro level game and then saying, hey, I'm going to run this with my team, and not have the horses to be able to do it.
Great. Coach Clark, I'm going to go to you. Just alter it a little bit. What do you want to see your kids get out of a season if you're coaching a bantam, midget, you know, even junior team? If they look back, you know, I'll put you guys on a hard spot here. If they look back after and say, this is what my experience was like, what's success for you? Like, when they say those comments, what's success look like for you?
Success, I mean, it's always measured in growth. So, you know, what's your start and what's your end point? So, you know, and I still see bantam, midget, and junior. I would see them as different. You know, junior is where you're squeezing that pyramid a little bit, and those athletes want more out of their experience in terms of a competitive opportunity. But to group them together, I would say growth, improvement, and opportunity. So it doesn't matter if it's tyke, midget, bantam, junior, or even, you know, pro. guys need to develop, and I say guys because that's what I'm coaching, but athletes need to develop. And so, you've got to see progress, and it's got to be purposeful. You need a plan, and you need long-term plans, and you need short-term plans, but you've got to show development across that season. And results-based and process and that gets thrown around a lot, but it gets thrown around because it's purposeful, and you don't get results without a process. So there aren't any shortcuts. So the process of development is ultimately what gets you results. So I would just say that, you got to look at where you're starting, where you're finishing. Because for some teams in junior, I mean, I took over the Toronto Beaches years ago, junior A, and we ended up with a 6th place finish. And for us, that was a Minto Cup success because we had come so far along. So I think you've got to look at stage, starting point, end point, and then judge your successes on that.
Coach Day, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, obviously midget and junior are kind of a lot of kids end up quitting at that age. And I think, as people involved in the game in midget and junior, you got to be able to see those athletes and, hey, maybe they're not going to be able to play university lacrosse or senior or pro, but there is an opportunity to try and keep those really good athletes and really good people in the game, whether they become coaches or whether they become officials. And I think that's kind of right there, that 16 to 21 is hey, you know what? This guy's 5'6", unbelievable guy, not great speed, unbelievable brain for the game, could be a great official. And, you have to groom those people, could be a great coach. That's where you have to groom those people to keep them involved in the game. Because a lot of times that's when they quit, whether it's jobs, high school, but that's kind of a key age to kind of groom them into making the game better.
Ian, I'm going to go to you on this. Lots of coaches on this group, on this call. Some kind of last advice for coaches that are trying to balance recreational and competitive. What are they doing? Any kind of last minute advice for them?
Well, I think, two things. I guess from just an overall coaching perspective, because I've coached at that level as well, in lacrosse as well as other sports. I think the whole idea, and it's been mentioned over and over here, about focusing on skill development at the younger ages. There's nothing that drives me crazy more than seeing a really young age coach or a coach of a young age group who's working on systems already and things like that, trying to find ways to win games without doing much to develop the players. And so I think that's the first thing that I would say, is just that skill development has to be first and foremost. And the younger the age, the more the focus has to be on that. And then from the referee's perspective, I think it's been mentioned a couple times, just that partnership approach, especially for those young officials, and just knowing that they're going to make a lot of mistakes. You're not getting a world-class referee at your 11U game. That's just not how that works. And so for coaches and fans and players as well to understand that, those refs are going to do the very best they can, likely going to miss a few things, maybe not know the rules as well as that coach does. Having that support from the coach, I think goes a long way. So,
Lee, anything to kind of add?
Yeah, and I mean, just the same way that Coach Clark and Coach Day mentioned that they're losing players at that 18, 19, 20-year-old window. It's the same situation in the officiating world. We're losing a lot of officials at that age. Could it be a myriad of reasons within the game, but most of it's personal changes and life changes. So for those of you who are on the call here with in the officiating world, do what you can to retain those young adults within that age bracket. They're needed.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm just going to let the coaches finish off this, and then we'll jump off. We only have about a minute for each of them. one of the themes that we've talked about here is adapting the game for the people that are in front of it. We're in a really, I would call a code red position here in lacrosse, in which numbers have dropped. And to use a hockey example, I think, Hockey Canada's numbers at the youth, at the very young level, dropped over 150,000 people between 2 years, about 3 years ago, and nobody pressed the panic button. As lacrosse coaches at the highest level, what's kind of a last comment for you to coaches that are on here that are maybe coaching at whatever level, that are, that will allow them to understand that retaining those players for a long-term growth and development is important? Just maybe some last kind of, coaches tidbits on that.
I'll go first on that, Russ. Clark and I are weekly on calls with the NLL competition committee, and one of the biggest things that comes up every week on competition committees are the player pool. Where are we, we're expanding obviously to Fort Worth this year. Expansion is, coming out of COVID, we're a league that's going to have, we've got great ownership and great expansion coming, but we as a group talk about it every week. Where are we going to get players, and where are we going to get coaches, and where are we going to get officials? So it's imperative that, over the next 10 to 20 years that we reinvigorate the box lacrosse and field lacrosse in our country somehow to sell it, whether it's, as we talked about, reducing the violence and making the game more appealing to everybody, new Canadians and everybody. I think that's huge for us. So we talk about it at the highest level, that we're worried. And, my team in Philly, we've got 25 guys, 7 American guys, but, the majority of the league's still Canadian. And, that's where the goalies come from. That's where the coaches come from. So we need to make sure that we take care of it starting at a young age and keep people involved as much as possible.
Coach Fritsch?
Yeah, I think we need to continue. I was one of the, first people that was advocating the WLA about headshots. We've all talked about aggression. I think it's going to take us a while, or it's going to take kind of like when mouth guards first came in, like we started at the young ages. So incrementally over time, we've got to continue to be consistent with our calls, consistent with our coaching, step in when, a call is missed on the floor, but you can address it as a coach on the bench and consequence your kid, player, missing period, missing game. Like, there's some things that we see as a coach that we might ignore from time to time. We've got to step up and kind of honor the game in a better fashion. For sure, going down the line here, I agree with Paul. Like at our, this is a great time for a number of, my son next year and a few boys locally, like BC boys and all over Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan are heading south to play college lacrosse. And this game is growing. And if we don't change our ways, there was a time where the U.S. was always having competitive games with Canada, but we could never really get over that hump. Now I can see that reversing itself with a number of pockets throughout the United States that are doing amazing things with U.S. Boxla. That is going to come back to get us. They're more athletic. They're focused on different things, and I think we need to be very careful of that if we want to prevent a silver medal at a world championship at some point.
Coach Clark?
That would be my biggest thing too, in line with Paul and Friggy, is we've got to, there needs to be a bit of a shift and, sort of get away from the optics of the violence of the game, that old school kind of, we almost have a battle of attrition, that the only players left at midget and junior are the ones who've survived all those other years. So, and it's true. And I mean, it sort of perpetuates that, not the stereotype, but the optics of the game. So I think we need a bit of an ideological shift in terms of, getting rid of this need and this thirst for contact and physicality at the young age. And, it's a physical enough game by accident almost, that we don't need to have other parts in there that discourage people from being involved. So I think that if we want to look at something about retention and growth, I think that's one of the biggest.
Absolutely. I think we're going to bring this session to a close here. We're going to jump back on in 30 minutes, but absolutely awesome discussion. We had some talking points, but I like the fact that we don't stay on a script too much and let it take us where it's supposed to. To me, the session went in an area that I think, Bruce and Dave and I didn't expect, but it's a valid point and a huge national issue to make the game more appealing. We have probably the most beautiful athletic game out there, and we don't want to demean it by allowing a physical part of it to bring everybody down to the lowest common denominator, but outside of making people reach higher. And I think if we can learn from Hockey Canada one thing, not to rip on hockey, but they really had a opportunity to see the issue coming from US hockey, and US hockey spent significant time redeveloping their entire program. And now when you go look at first round draft picks in the NHL, how many of them are coming from USA hockey? It's pretty incredible. We're going to jump off. I have a question here that I'll bring up in 30 minutes when we start our next session. Next session is really going to focus on the meshing of the referees and coaches. I think it's the most important discussion. I think it's going to really tailor off of this one well. But how do we communicate with each other? How do we help each other to grow the game? So, in 5 years from now, when we're having these discussions, our numbers are double on both sides. So we're going to jump off for 30 minutes here and let everybody just take a quick break. And then we'll be back on for that second session. Thank you all.